I'm here to kill chaos. So, what even is this? When I first saw this trailer, my reaction was, this is really bad writing. Or is it just a really bad translation? To the Japanese trailer. And my takeaways from a quick watch of that trailer. 1. It doesn't seem to have been any better received by Japanese viewers than it was in the West, going by the number of dislikes and negative comments on here. 2. The phrase defeat chaos in Japanese is kaosu o taosu, which is kind of a cute rhyming phrase, and it does sound a little less jarring and repetitive when they say it in the trailer over and over and over.
カオスを倒す。カオス。カオスを倒したい。カオス。俺たちはカオスを倒しに来た。
And 3, and most notably, the first impression of the trailer you get is this red tagline. And I thought that tagline sounded a bit familiar when I saw it, and I wondered, is that a direct quote from the Final Fantasy I ending? So, I looked up a video of that ending to check my memory, and indeed, there it is. Senshi tachi wa tatakai no kyoku o kokoro no soko ni shimaikomu. The warriors hold the memory of the battle deep within their hearts. The tagline they used in the English trailer, with the memory of their struggle buried deep in their hearts, is actually directly from the later Dawn of Souls remake of Final Fantasy I as well, but it's not from the NES translation. And the NES translation is the only one that I've personally played. And that line just doesn't seem as memorable to me in English anyway, I don't think, since it doesn't have that direct reference to the warriors to jog your memory. And without that, it just kind of came across as generic trailerese to me. And accordingly, you can see that they have that same tagline prominently displayed on the Japanese promotional website, but it is nowhere to be seen on the English page. So, in the Japanese marketing, they are explicitly trying to tie Stranger of Paradise into a theme directly from the ending of Final Fantasy I. So, what theme is it, and what can we glean from it? Let us review the ending. Note that spoilers for Final Fantasy I will follow, if anyone really cares about that in 2021. I am going to be referring to the Dawn of Souls translation here, since that seems to be a pretty good representation of the original Famicom text to me. So it starts out by explaining the weird time loop predestination paradox thing that drives the game's plot. The Light Warriors defeat Garland in the Temple of Chaos, where he then gets pulled through a time portal into the past. Consumed by hatred after his defeat, he absorbs the 4 elemental powers that converge there, and creates the 4 chaoses, the 4 themes, and uses them to redirect the elemental powers into creating the time portal that brought him there in the first place, bringing ruin to the world in the process. The Light Warriors break this time loop by going to the past and defeating him, again, before he can create the time portal at all. The game then asks, when did any of this actually happen? Because people tend to assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, when in reality it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey... No, that's something else. Anyway, from a linear subjective viewpoint, history was changed so that none of it ever happened at all. So, neither the Light Warriors nor anyone else is going to remember it. But according to the text, people will retain some impression of it regardless, and that will manifest in people telling fantasy stories inspired by it. Specifically, fantasy stories about elves, dragons, vanished high-tech civilizations, you could even say Final Fantasy stories. And for the Light Warriors, those buried memories will imbue them with the conviction to continue protecting the world, and this is where we get to that quote from the Stranger of Paradise trailer. The text then opens up the fourth wall and addresses the player directly and tells them to keep the 4 crystals in their heart and not let the powers of nature be misused, because you, the player, were the real Light Warrior all along, and you should now be inspired to bring light to the world forever and ever. So, to me, what the writer was trying to convey here is that the game that you, the player, just finished was actually a buried memory of that time when you, specifically, were the chosen warrior who saved the world in a timeline that never happened, and they are reminding you of that fact, so that you will continue to bring light to the world after you turn off the game. And the use of that quote, about a warrior keeping a memory buried deep in their heart, seems to be trying to evoke that sentiment and link it to Stranger of Paradise. So, how do we get from there to some thuggish guy swaggering around, growling about how much he hates chaos while smashing goblin skulls into crystal? Well, let's imagine for a moment that you take the average 10-year-old gamer from 2021 and transport them into Final Fantasy I. They probably know from cultural osmosis, gamer cultural osmosis, that chaos is the end boss of the first Final Fantasy, and therefore, you win at Final Fantasy I by killing chaos. But probably no more than that. So they fixate on killing chaos as their only goal, and storm right up to the final dungeon like they're playing Call of Battle Strike NFL 2021, completely unaware of the sentiment that Final Fantasy I was actually trying to convey, which is pretty much exactly what this guy does. But they'll probably find out over time that that's not what being what a Warrior of Light actually means. They'll find out that hatred is exactly what keeps the time loop that creates chaos going, and that fighting from a position of hatred is therefore counterproductive. And they'll hold that memory in their heart and go back to Earth as a better Warrior of Light. Now, granted, Jack and friends likely won't turn out to be literal people from Earth, and maybe they'll just be from a modern-ish world with that same gritty and cynical mindset. And we then get to see within the narrative how they return as Warriors of Light to their own gritty world, with the memories of Final Fantasy buried deep in their hearts, and prove to their own world that light is actually more powerful than darkness. And I feel like that interpretation aligns pretty well with this Famitsu interview, where creative producer Nomura Tetsuya and director Inoue Daisuke are discussing the game and the meaning of its title. And if my translation isn't too far off, what Nomura-san says is this. Who the protagonist of Final Fantasy I, the Warrior of Light, is, and where they come from, is discussed in Final Fantasy I's ending. Jack and his companions are, similarly, strangers. What sort of people are they? Are they Warriors of Light? These questions are the core of the story, so throughout the story, they will be like strangers. Paradise means a place of people who have been saved, and indicates that Jack and his companions, the strangers, will gather in paradise. And Inoue-san then continues, Stranger of Paradise means a stranger who is in paradise, but alternatively it can also mean someone who is not meant to be paradise. So we think it's a perfect title to express this game's story. So, they are explicitly making that tie into the Final Fantasy I ending. The Warrior of Light was someone from another world, i.e., you, the player, from Earth, and somehow, Jack is in a similar position to that. He is in a world he doesn't really belong in. And I think the implication is that it is a world he is not really good enough to be in. Yet. But maybe, as he spends time in that world, he will learn what it really means to be a Warrior of Light. Maybe there will be even a redemption arc of some kind involved, and he will end up being similar to the greatest Final Fantasy protagonist of them all, and earn his rightful place in paradise. And if that is the direction they're going, I will actually be really excited by it. This whole gritty, edgy, rough aesthetic is really big in our culture right now. People seem to believe that we live in this fundamentally Hobbesian reality, and that being an angry antihero meeting violence with more violence is the most practical way to face that reality, and that beauty, nobility, and idealism are just these naive, cheesy fantasies that people cling to because they can't actually deal with reality. And if we get a story that really challenges that worldview and makes a believable case that the most effective and practical way to deal with reality really is with simple goodness and light and faith in the crystals in your heart, I will be ecstatic. I probably still won't actually play it, though. I cannot mash buttons that frantically. Thank you for watching, and may you bring beauty and light to the world.